Welcome to the Strategic Treasurer Podcast, your source for interesting Treasury news in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Discussions around robotic process automation and machine learning can be fun, though the reality of their use can sometimes seem distant. When these concepts are applied to current real-world Treasury situations, it becomes much more exciting and of great practical benefit. In this episode of the podcast, Strategic Treasurer's Craig Jeffery interviews Camille Felton and Stephen Peterson of Chick-fil-A about their journey into the use of RPA and bots at the top-tier restaurant chain. The discussion covers what activities they targeted, the results achieved, and what's next on the horizon. Their specific use cases include managing bank statements and data, accounts payable activities, along with sales and use tax reporting. Driving efficiency means reducing manual processes and errors. Listen in and learn more about RPA in the context of Treasury.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. I'm Craig Jeffery. I'm very excited about today's topic. It's Treasury's journey in the use of robotic process automation, or RPA. I'm here with two people from Chick-fil-A, Camille.
Glad to be here.
And Stephen.
Happy to be here.
Stephen is the head of Treasury Operations, and Camille leads the activities around Treasury Analytics and has a lot of direct responsibility for RPA in Treasury. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to start this podcast off with a discussion, an overview of the business and growth. Not everyone has their kids screaming to go to Chick-fil-A 3 times a day, but maybe just give a quick overview of the business and the growth that your organization has been experiencing.
Yeah, great question, Craig. So Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy opened the Dwarf Grill in 1946, and a couple years later named it the Dwarf House. In 1967, he actually founded and opened the first Chick-fil-A over at Greenbrier Mall in Atlanta, and it's actually still open today, that location. Today, we have over 2,300 restaurants in 47 states in Washington, D.C. These restaurants comprise of freestanding restaurants, mall locations, and licensee locations you might see in hospitals, airports, or college campuses. And then we also have our inline units, which are Chick-fil-A's inside urban locations like a Chicago or Washington, D.C. So in 2017, Chick-fil-A had reported revenue of more than $9 billion. And that marks 50 consecutive years of sales growth. So we're really proud of that accomplishment and what Chick-fil-A has been able to do over the years. A couple other things that are great points about Chick-fil-A and its history and what we're trying to do as a company is Chick-fil-A was named one of the top 100 places to work by Glassdoor in 2017. And one of the other things we're really proud of today is the amount of scholarships we've given to team members. And over the years, in 2018, we've awarded over $14 million in scholarships. And since 1973, we have awarded approximately $45 million in scholarships to over 40,000 team members.
Oh, excellent. So that's a lot of growth in this 50-plus year history and 50 years of solid growth. So the structure of Treasury, how does that look? How are you organized?
Okay. That's great. That's a great question. So our Treasury group is a little bit larger than most other corporations. Underneath the Treasury umbrella is cash management. We also have Treasury accounting. And Treasury accounting they're responsible for reconciling bank accounts for our franchisees. We also have payroll and benefits. They serve the corporate employees and managing 401k, payroll, our pension plan. And then we also have the accounts payable group, who is responsible for making payments to our corporate vendors and suppliers. So underneath the cash management umbrella, there's two groups. There's really cash management operations, and the responsibilities underneath that group are opening up bank accounts for both our franchisees and for corporate. Also, we are responsible for calculating the daily cash position for the company and sending bank files for positive pay, for payroll, and for AP vendor payments. So we have that side of the house, and then on the other group underneath the cash management umbrella is financial risk analytics, where Camille leads that group, and they're responsible more for the analytics within cash management and treasury, and that includes lease versus buy analysis when we're procuring different assets for the corporation, whether that be food trucks, whether it be dishwashers, coffee machines. And also, we manage the short-term investments for Chick-fil-A. So we have a short-term cash portfolio that we currently are managing for Chick-fil-A. Underneath that group is credit card fee analysis. So a majority of our transactions are done through cards. So we have a person responsible for analyzing those fees and making sure we get the best fees possible through that payment platform. So that kind of gives you an overview. We also do, cash flow forecasting. That's very important in when managing short-term investments. And we also get involved in a lot of other projects throughout the company because everything touches cash. So that's a little bit about Treasury.
Yeah, it's good to hear the structure and then some of the differences that you have versus other areas. Oftentimes reconciliation isn't in Treasury, sometimes it is. And then, analysis, and some organizations aren't heavy in investments. They might be net borrowers, but thanks for that background. Now, I want to jump into some of the terms, right? The header of the podcast is called Treasury's Journey in the Use of Robotic Process Automation. I'll use the abbreviation RPA. Some people have different definitions of it, and there's not necessarily one standard. So I'll start with you, Camille. If you could just explain what do you mean by RPA, robotic process automation, or what does Chick-fil-A mean by that? So that we're working off the same set of terms. This is not a macro in Excel, right?
Correct. Robotic software automation is taking software to the end of its limits. So we're using our ERP as far as it can go. We're using Excel as far as it can go. We're using some of our other tools, whether it be dashboard visualization or data prep and cleansing tools, before we ever put bots into place. So our bots, think of them as digital workers. So anything that you can mimic over and over and over with usually structured data. So what does that mean? So our robots, as I said, we're calling them digital workers, and those digital workers perform whatever tasks we've given them over and over and over every single day, or whatever the cadence is. They perform those tasks quickly, and the cool part is that they're pretty much error-free. If we train them correctly, they can do downloading bank statements. They can populate PDF forms for tax or payroll. So it's a really neat journey, but I want to be very clear that this is not a physical robot. This is actually a robot that sits on a server, so it's not hacking someone's computer or working in the background of one person's computer. It's actually working on our server so that a person that used to do a manual task can now do other value-added tasks instead.
So is this, the way you define that, just for some additional clarity, so these bots that are digital workers, are they working solely within, let's say, your ERP? Are they also working between systems, taking data from one, massaging it, putting it in another without having to have someone involved in that process?
Correct. So what we're doing is using we have two bots within financial services at Chick-fil-A. We're calling them FinBot 1 and FinBot 2. So very fancy terms, we've named them. But those two digital workers are working within the space to do whatever we can't do with our other tools. So if it's something like going in and downloading a report from the ERP system, the bot will go in and do that, because in the past we've automated it up to that place and then we couldn't get it any more scheduled. And so now we can have a robot come in and do that manual piece of the process, and then the ERP picks up from there. So it's working within whatever tools, but it's also working between tools, as you mentioned.
So do you see this as the use of bots and robotic process automation as akin to the challenge of moving towards straight-through processing, where the handoffs between machines or areas or processes are now automated, so it's faster, smoother, handles the exceptions, do you use the term straight-through processing as well?
We haven't used the term straight-through processing, but I like that term, and that elaborates on what we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do is use the robotic process automation, the RPA, to fill in the gaps where we can't do today without a human touching.
All right. Yeah, the digital worker, Finbot 1 and Finbot 2. Let's think about the processes that you changed. How did you go about looking at those? You described that element of, we took it as far as we could go within the system. Now we took it farther. So how did you categorize that? I don't know if Camille, you want to answer that, or Stephen, but how did you target these different areas? And you shared 4 with me before, and we'll get into some of those in the podcast. So Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that.
So it has been a journey. This hasn't happened overnight. When I started Chick-fil-A and in the Treasury Department 5.5 years ago, the cash position was very manual. We printed off reports from the bank portal and manually keyed this information into an Excel spreadsheet. We also transferred bank files manually through the bank portal, and we reconciled items by printing out worksheets from our tax department and matching them up against different bank statements. So a very manual process. So when we knew we had to change that, because Chick-fil-A has grown, is continuing to grow tremendously. So we weren't, as a lot of Treasury departments, we haven't had a lot of headcount growth. So we knew we need to automate some of these processes. Like when I first started, we were only transferring 10 files to the bank. Today, we're transferring over 53 files to the bank. So just in that 5.5 years, we've seen tremendous growth there. Also, we were receiving wires requests in different formats where they were coming in through whether it's email or spreadsheet or PDF. All the information wasn't in one spot. We had to kind of hunt for the banking information. So we were just wasting a lot of time with these manual processes. And one of the things too is, as people develop, they want to learn new skill sets. They want to do valuable and meaningful work. So we knew if we could take these manual processes and automate them, then we could have these team members work on other projects that they feel more passionate about and they feel are more meaningful to the success of Chick-fil-A.
Excellent. So targeting the big areas of wasted time or inefficient time, especially as you talk about a 5-fold growth of 5+-fold growth of downloading statements, and what might waste a couple minutes is not worth automating. But when you start getting up to hours and days, a month, there's some significant benefit of doing that. That's excellent to target that. I want to get into some of the use cases you have, because I think that's really interesting, because it's easy to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, machine learning conceptually, right? That's neat and it's cool. But when you think about the stewardship function of Treasury, to be efficient, to reduce errors are costly. Manual processes cause errors cause cost. It's not a good steward when we're inefficient. And so this helps in that process. So I'm really excited about this topic, if you couldn't tell already. But let's go through some of the use case examples of what you've done already. And you're in the journey, so it's not completely finished. Finbot 1 is not self-aware. It's not like Skynet. It does certain functions. Same thing with 2. But you've explained a couple of these use cases. And the first one had to do with statement management, and you've talked about that a little bit. But maybe you can go through some of the specifics of the situation, what's done, and then some of the metrics of how that's changed in terms of time and accuracy, error checking. Let's start with the statement management.
Great question. So we started with these bots because we could only get so far. One of the use cases is cash position automation. And so what we had done is we had gotten it to the point where it was automatically using macros and all of this other stuff. But the problem was we had to download the statements before it could ever trigger any of those events. And we had to manually put them into we were actually still using Excel. And so in order to make that better, in order for someone not to spend 4 hours, even at this point, it could take up to 4 hours after all these efficiencies to create our cash position every day, because you're going to find all these files, you're waiting on timing, all the different pieces of that. What we decided to do was figure out if we could do more with cash position. So what we started with was just simply downloading bank statements. We had reached the end of our capabilities in our bank portals where no matter what avenue we went down, we still had to have someone manually go and touch a file or touch a software in order to get that. What the robots are now doing is the robots are actually downloading the statements at certain cadences throughout the day. So maybe at 8 a.m. we get all of our previous day information. Maybe at 8 a.m. we also want to know what our balances are for current day. So they're looking at that. But one of the cool things that we have done is take it to the next level. So once we had the existing processes, okay, we can download the data at certain cadences and make this run in as little as 15 to 20 seconds, then maybe we could add multiple times throughout the day that we're actually running these reports. And what it's allowed us to do is to have more check-ins. So we are really leaning towards more real-time data because we're able to make real-time decisions because we have accurate and up-to-date information.
That's great. And then I guess a question too. So primarily you're downloading this information from the bank portals. You're not using Swift, for example, or a Treasury aggregator. You're building the connections right through each individual bank portal, controlling it that way.
That's correct. And the reason we went that way instead of maybe Swift or BAI files is actually because our IT team is tapped to their fullest capacity. They're working on other things, and we wanted the people that were dealing with the data, the people who knew the data, to be able to run this process. And as a result of that, what we've done is actually we're downloading primarily Excel files so that we can upload these into different places. One of the next steps for our robotic process automation is to have the bots downloading that and storing that in a data warehouse. If we're just storing it on a shared drive and kind of compiling files every single day, we're not necessarily creating efficiencies because we still have to figure out the report across time and what does trending look like across time. And so someone would still manually have to pull or create a dashboard that would have data across time. Well, what this will allow us to do in the future is go straight from downloading the bank statement, sending the information that's needed into the different areas of Treasury, and then from there, if it looks like that means we need to use another tool to do some data prep and cleansing, one of the ones that we're actually using is called Alteryx. And so the robot kicks off the download of the process. Alteryx jumps in, cleanses that data, sends it out to the different departments, and then from there we hope to in the future have that data repository so that we can have Tableau dashboards across time.
Excellent. So you're taking that data for your current decisioning, you're also storing it for later use and analysis, and I like that. And we could get into discussion about the Treasury technology stack of data, connectivity, systems, reporting, and analytics. That would be a discursus for sure today, but that's great. And the idea of using a BI tool to help look at self-serve on that data is a key benefit of using robots to put the data in a way that's now usable for the analytical mind of Treasury. So that's excellent. Another use case you talked about was sales and use taxes, and you described the pain of that. Maybe you could go through the pain of sales and use taxes, and then what you did to use the robots. I don't know if that was Finbot 1 or 2.
I don't either, so your guess is as good as mine which robot we used. So we actually have 2 robots in our Chick-fil-A robotic process automation that are in test and in pilot right now. Those 2 robots will be working in 3 different areas. Treasury, which comprises both accounts payable use cases as well as cash management and financial risk analytics use cases, payroll use cases, and then we have a few tax payroll use cases. One of the tax payroll use cases is actually just populating some of the forms. Previously, we had to do a lot of manual data entry into PDF forms in order to do things like paying taxes or Wells Fargo Payment Manager check payments. And as a result of that, we are using this bot to populate the PDFs instead of an accountant spending valuable time working on those PDFs.
I thought these PDFs were called smart PDFs because they're easy to use, but it's very manual if you're doing a bunch of them, right? It might be easier for one But when you put a lot there, it becomes a problem, right? They're copy pasting. How much time does that take, and what is the bot benefit been?
Sure. So we've estimated with these, we have about 8 use cases in flight right now. We're estimating about 171 hours saved per month. And so that's a great benefit, because what this will allow us to do is to create more space to do other tasks, to do other value add, whether that's creating better dashboards, whether that's reporting in different ways, whether that's figuring out how to be proactive instead of reactive in our analysis.
That's a little bit, 171 hours a month is a little bit more than the productivity time for a full-time person. So that's a yield of whatever. That's pretty impressive for your first flight of use cases. And that's what you were targeting. You're targeting the big areas of inefficiency, and then you can start leveraging that time. Excellent. So did you want to talk about the AP activity that you had as well? Maybe describe the situation there.
Sure. So our accounts payable bot is actually doing some more data cleansing than anything else. It's taking Excel files that we are getting in from different distributors and making sure they all look the same. In order to upload files into our ERP system, we all have to have them very uniform and in a templated way. Well, in order to get that data into the format we need accounts payable to be able to receive those Excel files in the manner that they need to upload them. Well, that wasn't happening. And as a result of that, we were able to use a robot to start cleansing and prepping this data, because that's a repetitive task. We see similar changes or similar differences and discrepancies in the data every single month. And so as a result of that, they were able to figure out how to automate that process.
Are there any other use cases you have on the roadmap for what's next? You know, you're going from high value, high time to the next area. Is there the next flight lined up?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Craig. So yeah, we are looking through all our processes currently, whether it's in cash management or other areas in Treasury, to figure out where there's some efficiencies we can gain from employing these robots. So one of the processes we're looking at is transferring of the bank files. Currently, we upload the bank file to the bank portal. And again, we have 53 files we upload and download. So we've been working with our IT group to kind of automate that process. So so the bank can come pick up that file off of our server, and then we don't have to manually upload those anymore. So we're about halfway through that process, and we're trying to see how, if we could use a robotics to really streamline that process as well. If a file fails, to kind of let us know, okay, that file hasn't been sent, because these are pretty sensitive files. These are payroll files. These are positive pay files. Checks are going out to vendors, whether on the store side or the corporate side. So we need to know when these processes fail. So we're looking at ways that maybe we could leverage robotics to improve this process.
Can I just ask a question about that in terms of putting files out there, pulling them? There's always the communication schedulers that look every 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is, to go and see if something's there and pull it in. You're not talking about just doing that. You're talking about making sure it's there at the right time and getting someone involved if it's not there, to find out earlier. Is that what you're?
Yeah, no, that's correct. With our positive pay files, I mean, our franchisees and our issuing checks, all day long. I mean, because we have stores on both the East Coast and West Coast, so we need to get those positive pay files to the banks as quickly as possible. So we don't want to find out the next day that a positive pay file failed, or that it wasn't there, or wasn't created, or didn't transfer properly. So we want to know, if there's an issue with that file as soon as possible. So that's why we think we can leverage some of these robotics to do that.
The other cool thing about robotics is that we're setting up alerts within the system. And so if an exception that it didn't expect to happens, it'll generate an email to one of the stakeholders to say, hey, red flag, right now we have an exception and we need to handle it accordingly.
Right, it's failed 4 times. So are these exceptions something happened that was unexpected, or something didn't happen that was supposed to occur, by a certain time? You're using both of those
Either.
types?
It's both of those. So it could be that it gets to a certain point in the process and it can't log in to the Wells Fargo bank portal. And so then it's going to generate an email that says, hey, we can't log into the bank portal. We can't continue this task. It's also going to say, there are only 2 files here and I expected 3. So where's the 3rd file? So there's both types of alerts.
Do your alerts also have any kind of escalation process, like case management? If you alert something to something that hasn't happened and it's critical and it's not fixed or something reset within 20 minutes, these wires haven't been sent, the positive pay files that were supposed to go out by 4 haven't gone out, now it's 5, and so someone else gets alerted. Do you schedule those tiering and escalation things in as well?
As Stephen mentioned, this is a journey, and I love the idea. We actually haven't gotten to that point yet, but yes, it's on the radar to say, okay, now loop back through, and if this happens again, you've kind of kicked off another point in the process. So yes, it'll be, and it has a lot of controls. Another piece of robotic process automation based on the software that we're using is it has audit ability. So it has an audit trail for every single thing that this robot is doing so that we can generate that information just as we could within any of our other systems.
Those are great examples, and it's so exciting to hear how far you guys have come along on that and are moving through it. There is so much more on technology I'd like to discuss with you. I hope we can get you both back in for another podcast on technology. Thank you.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.